Let's go ahead and start here. Again, for everyone, this is the Doctors for America call tonight about sort of a workshop on writing op-eds or letter to the editor, or overall sort of in a more general sense, sort of composing your narrative. How do we sort of tell our story however we want to? So it's kind of open-ended forum. My name's Arka Deb. I'm DFA's co-chair on gun violence prevention on the action area. I'll then also ask a couple people to introduce themselves. And I'll also say today's op-ed workshop, we're gonna, one of our members here is nicely volunteered to speak about gun violence prevention op-ed. That's sort of the idea here, that we're sort of that today's op-ed workshop will be somehow related to gun violence prevention. Centered on it as expected, but that's okay. We should be talking about general principles about writing and everything as well. I guess that's all I'll say to start off with. I'll ask a couple people to introduce themselves. Allison, could you introduce yourself, and we'll pass the baton to Bob and Kelly.
Yeah, sure, everybody. Hi, I'm Allison Volkman. I'm on staff at DFA. So I work on the gun violence prevention topic with a lot of our wonderful leaders that are on this call this evening, as well as a couple other issue groups. And you can definitely learn more about Doctors for America by going to drs4america.org. I wanted to just, before you introduce other people, everyone, you're going to have a few questions arrive on your screen, and you can answer them or not. It's not required. Just to show a little bit about where you all are from, and then I can share at the end so people know where people are calling in from. Sometimes when we have a little bit larger calls, we'll start to be doing these kinds of things because we don't have enough time to go around to everybody. And then Ark, you can keep going, and I'll end the poll is in just a moment.
Sure. And also they'll say this, and tonight we're going to be on the call until maybe 9:25, something like that. Maybe at 9:50, depending on how, if the conversation is still going at that point. And then we may also give some, at the end, we'll give some other updates on things upcoming events. If I could also ask Bob, could you introduce yourself as well? I'm going to ask Bob and Kelly and our author here, Gene, to introduce themselves. Bob? I think you're on mute, Bob. I think you're still on mute, Bob. Bob, you're on mute. Can you hear me? Bob, I can't hear you, Bob. Press mute.
Okay, so I'm from the other. I'm from New Mexico. It's not the South. It's not the East or West Coast. It's not the Midwest, and it's not Alaska. But it is called Mountain States. Anyway, I want to just say a couple things. Allison is fantastic. What she does as an administrator, we should be thankful for. And Dr. Deb has brought energy and vitality to a committee that was almost moribund. And so tonight you'll hear from him about writing, which is something near and dear to my heart, as are the Warriors who are playing the lowly Lakers tonight, okay? Having said that, get some enthusiasm for whatever your issue is. If it's not gun violence, it can be healthcare for Americans. It can be women's access to necessary services, children's services for health issues. That's what ARCA is going to be helping you to be able to get out there in letters to the editor, op-ed pieces, and any other way you can represent the interest of doctors and our patients through advocacy. So God bless you.
And thanks, Bob. And I'm it's just in the interest of also sort of getting to the workshop aspect of this and working through some content. I'm just going to ask Jean to first introduce herself, because she's got something we can work on. And then everyone else, I'm not going to sort of do intros. I'm going to instead say that I want everyone to please participate, whether you want to raise your hand or take yourself off mute, just raise your hand. And if you can introduce yourself at first, because not everyone on the call knows each other. I know some of us are familiar with each other, but not everyone does. Jean, could you also introduce yourself?
Yes.
And then after introducing yourself, you let me know if you want me to sort of bring up part of your article or not, and we'll just talk about what you're working on.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So, hi, everyone. I'm one of the nurse members here. I, follow gun violence, well, gun safety, I try to call it now. And I was caught by this op-ed by Mr. Gross. I guess he used to run, I'm sorry, someone's coming in the door right now. He used to run Brady, that gun advocacy campaign. And, he spoke about how he did an op-ed in the New York Times, and he spoke about something I actually learned at DFA, which is how the vast majority of shootings are not the mass shootings, but rather suicide in almost all states, certainly nationally, and then like street violence, which I hear a lot about here in New York City, and then accidents. So I just thought his article was so nicely written, and I learned something from it about this stratification of statistics. So, and I guess but on the same token, I feel very emotional about any of these shootings I hear about locally. So I didn't really have a particular aim when I drafted this little letter to the editor, which was not accepted. But I just wanted, in the letter, I just acknowledged what Brady said, and then I asked the New York Times, in this case, to speak more prevalently about interventions, particularly in the cities, that can perhaps prevent shootings. So I guess that's my interest,
And maybe I can also facilitate the discussion by asking sort of a question. So, Jean, your interest is to discuss. Let me just put it like that. Point. Your interest is to discuss, to make what point come across from your writing piece. What do you want the reader to walk away with?
That urban shootings should be given more attention.
So bring it.
Very
So
broad.
okay. So giving, putting light on the magnitude of the problem, or just educating people about the problem.
I guess so, about the magnitude. Although I didn't even include that. But yeah, that would be a way to illustrate the problem, is to talk about the magnitude. Yeah.
Okay. If does anyone want to sort of speak about that? How do you, like, when it comes to sort of gun violence, especially what, again, Jean is from Brooklyn, Jean, right?
I'm actually from Manhattan, but just I'm always reading about this. Yeah.
You want to speak about the magnitude of non-mass shooting violence. Okay.
Right.
Does anyone have, and Gina, when you want, I can bring up sort of a part of your piece and we can sort of talk about it.
Feel free to, if you think it will illustrate a point. Yeah.
Well, first, why don't I ask the audience here, how do you all feel about sort of that message? Here's the one thing, we're all going to have different messages that we want to bring across, but how do you all feel about trying to get that message out through a article, through an op-ed or letter to the editor?
I think it's a critical message, and I think an op-ed is a really good way to bring it forward. I think those of us in urban centers recognize this, but I think a lot of the public really only pays attention when it's a mass shooting type situation. But, the urban violence is much more prevalent and greater numbers, greater impact. So, I think it's a really critical message, Jean, and I think it's very important to get that out.
And Marion, do you mind just letting us know how you'd like to be, just introduce yourself in terms of how you'd like to be addressed, whether your pronouns and just where you're sitting. Just keep it short.
Sure, absolutely. My name's Marion. You can all call me Marion, please. I'm a pediatric surgeon, and I recently moved from Tucson, Arizona to Chicago. I'm at the University of Chicago now. And actually, the whole reason for my move was to be able to do more of my advocacy and policy work on gun violence and health disparities.
Arka,
and my pronouns are she and her.
Oh, Well, you're more politically correct than I am. But I want to welcome and say hello to both Dr. Henrys tonight. But with respect to Dorothy, or I'm sorry, Jean, you got to have a hook. You don't want to be writing things and not have them get published. So you should go back to the paper and say, what could I have done differently? Because ultimately, it's great. You've got the interest, you know what your issue is, but you have to get their interest. I got an article, like ARCA got an article published, or an op-ed in the Baltimore paper recently. Mine was in the Boulder Daily Camera. I had never had an article published there, but I had gone to school in Boulder, Colorado. They didn't care that I was a professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco, or that I live in New Mexico, that I played in the marching band in Boulder, Colorado. I managed to get that as a way to get in and get a piece in after the mass shooting at King Soopers. So if your issue is people being shot or killing themselves, not in mass shootings, you have to tell it personally, and you have to make it about something interesting for that paper's audience.
Thank you. And I did read your letter to the editor because DFA sent it around. I thought it was really nicely written.
Yeah. Make people uncomfortable with this subject, I think, is also an issue.
And Jean, would you like me to share part of your piece here? And I also want to give Jean a hand. I'm going to give Jean a hand for being brave to share her writing. So I'm just going to say that. And Jean, would you like to me to share part of your piece? And if you maybe you'd like to say something about the hook, you know,
Yeah.
concept.
Okay.
Here, so I'm going to share it then. Okay, I'm going to share like a Word document that has it. And then you can sort of tell me. You can tell me where you want to go with this, Jean. Or
Yeah.
is this?
Well, of course, I mean, you know, some of this is really just about English composition, which, you know, I could use a review of, not tonight. So, you know, I guess really the emotional part comes in this last piece. And I guess, you know, it's sort of a philosophical question whether emotion should ever be part of this sort of thing, you know. So I don't know, you guys can just look at it or we can focus on.
Would you like us to look at any specific lines here? You mean like, I think I'm highlighting this here, this last paragraph, is that showing up on the screen?
Yes, it is.
Is there a specific line here you'd like us to concentrate on? Would you say as your hook, or we could all just read the last part and say whatever comments we have?
Yeah, could you just all read it and let us know if you have any comments?
As one of the only people on this call who probably just has a BA, I have a couple words here that I don't know. And so I just say that not to point out my own perhaps mediocre vocabulary, but to make sure that when you are writing, that you're writing for, I don't think if this is to the New York Times 8th grade audience is sort of the average. So I don't think that's the average for New York Times, however, but I think you get my point. I think okay. I'm too embarrassed to say which words I don't know.
I would have to look up inculcate, which is fine.
That was one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think you know, I tend to use big words when I can use simpler ones. So thank you for that reminder. Inculcate, I think, means like teach or put into.
Don't use a $10 word when you can use a $5 word, or probably a nickel word. Hi, my name is Cedric. I'm one of the DFA board members. Reading through this, the line that hits me the most is as a parent, it's my job to make safety decisions for my children. And I think like it takes the reader 2.5 paragraphs to get there. I would make that your opening line.
Which particular sentence? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
As a parent, it's my job to make safety decisions for my children. I would start there. but in the journalism thing, it's like, don't bury the lead, right? So take that, move it up, and start there. Because I think that the first paragraph is just too many numbers, and the average person reading it is going to be like, oh, this is way too much stuff. And they're going to stop reading after the first paragraph. Just a little background. I've written several op-eds before, not specifically on gun violence, but on various topics. And, one of the things that's going to happen with this, write it, have it ready. There will come another mass shooting, but even better, I think if your focus is on getting it on the everyday interpersonal violence angle, just wait for the next big shooting in Chicago, or when there's a bad weekend in the Bronx or something like that. And then that's the time to get it ready to go.
Yeah.
Or even submit it now.
And I know you're not being cynical, but you're pointing out like a very practical thing, which is right now I can be working on it. And then it's the positioning of it in terms of when you send it off to the editor, and not necessarily to the New York Times, but to some local New York City paper. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
It's
Some of this is really around English 101.
I would also say, I completely agree with Cedric.
You're muted.
You want to lead with something that draws people's attention. And he picked out a line that does. Aside from that, if you don't mind, which you can, you have to think more like Hemingway as opposed to Faulkner. You should have like crisp sentences, not complex, compound. I mean, that sentence was good as a parent, it's my job to make safety decisions for my children, period. As an advocate for safety, okay, you see what I'm getting at? That's what you do. That's what people, they get lost when they get past clauses and things of that sort. That's what newspapers want. And the statistics, you probably have too much. And so you have to pick which statistics you keep, and then it's powerful. And so you have a lot of good ideas in there, you need to redo it for the next time, like what Arka is suggesting, because it's going to happen again.
Yeah, thank you.
So may I say something here?
Please.
So I'm Sarah Williams. I'm a former internist and now a psychiatrist, work in Manhattan, live in Brooklyn. I'm wondering if I agree with what's been said. And I think one thing that we tend to struggle with when we try to write is that we get a little bit into sort of medical writing mode, with all the, the statistics and the arguments, right? And really, I think it does, it doesn't grab people. So I love that idea of the first sentence. And then, maybe some actual stories like, so-and-so's mother didn't get to make this choice. He was shot, on 168th Street and Fort Washington Avenue, something like that, and right. So if that feels comfortable to you, or your own, something about your own experience. I thought about this as I sewed up a 16-year-old in the ER who, had just been blasted. I mean, not a surgeon, so the only thing I remember is seeing a woman whose abdomen was shot full of buckshot by her husband, or something like. So bringing life to it, and then you can just put a few statistics in to back that up. That would be my thought, because I think,
Thank you,
I care a little bit less about Mr. Gross. I care more about you. You're writing it. I want to know, like, you're a parent. Now I know you're a parent, and I think you're a doctor from reading.
I'm a nurse. Yeah.
A nurse. Okay.
Yeah.
So like, I think that with DFA, right, amplifying your voice, we want to amplify the voices of medical students, of nurses, of EMTs, of physicians and residents. So I think say clearly who you are.
Right. You know what it is? I don't know if you guys have noticed, and I don't think it's unique to the New York Times. I was kind of just modeling what I often see, which is the writer of these letters to the editor often cites a prior article and the key point about the article. So all your points about starting with the, leading with something personal, leading with your main point, thank you. Just telling you though that I thought you were supposed to lead with.
So I appreciate the concept. I'm sorry, Gina, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, go ahead, that was all.
No, Gina, help me. So it sounds like I should be sort of highlighting this, that you're actually responding to this here.
Well,
Is that right?
I was.
Okay, and you're and the main message from this that you want to sort of emphasize again is
Well,
is
then
down
I
here?
guess it'd be the 30% intimate partner and gang related. It's sort of like I wanted to dignify, well, I didn't need to dignify, but I wanted to affirm what Gross is saying just on a political level. And I wanted the paper to bring attention to urban street violence. But that's two different things now I realize, so.
Gene, if I could give a quick comment. So if you were responding to an article that Gross wrote in April, that's going to have to be responded to within like a day or two. Because after that, letters to the editors are not really going to be relevant in the newspaper setting. A little bit different when it's like a medical journal, right? You have maybe a couple of weeks to respond to an article. So, and pardon me for not looking at it that way. I was looking at it more as an unsolicited op-ed in
Right.
that, which I think at this point it would have to be, unless you're waiting for someone else to write an article and then put it out there.
Right. Just in my defense, I did send it soon after that guy.
Okay, perfect.
But
Gotcha.
yeah,
No.
yeah.
Thank you.
Obviously, if I do it again, I'm not going to reference that specific article.
Right. But now, I mean, where you are, and again, the other thing too, like letters to editor tend to be 200, 250, maybe 300 words, whereas op-eds usually are closer to 7. So you have room here to expand a little bit, to get your points across. If you
Right.
restructure it as an op-ed and just have it ready to go. Because I think for a newspaper to want to publish it, they're going to want to publish it around the time of another big event, a newsworthy event.
Right.
And I'll put my email in the chat because there is I know a science reporter over at the Times. Or I guess she's an opinions person. So I could try to send it along when you have it kind of polished and everything, if that would be helpful.
Thank you, Cedric.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So I think this is really helpful. So Gene, it's my, I apologize that I didn't couch this that way. I didn't couch this. You saw this article, right?
Right.
And you wanna agree with one of the points, especially this point here.
Right.
Okay.
But that clarity is only coming now. That clarity is only coming now.
Yeah.
Because yeah. Go ahead, Arthur. Mhm.
Oh, no. Thank you. So that's fair. So anyone have any comments on that here? And if I think that's a fair thing, like just like Marion said at the beginning, this is a critical and important thing that if we want to emphasize this.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any comments of where we go from here when we want to?
We all learn from our mistakes, hopefully, or we repeat them and we're losers. So I'm trying to say, along with others, this is constructive. I don't want to say criticism, but input. So first off, start with a letter to the editor. Forget about an op-ed piece. If they don't know you, if you don't represent a major organization, they're not going to. The New York Times is not publish an op-ed piece. This is long enough to be a long letter. It could be cut down. if you want to say it's in response to something, make it short, to the point, declarative sentences, and lead with the stuff that is what people will relate to. So as a parent, again, that's what we come back to. And so, and then the next sentence would be, I read the letter about the gun control movement and such. You go from there. And I
Right.
think you're okay. Your sentences have to be shorter. I mean, they're really complex. There's too much information. No, really, I'm not. There's a lot of good information, but and you should never do multiple URLs in an op-ed piece. I don't know if you should even do one. They can't, like, if they don't get the electronic version, it's a waste of everybody's time, and it's a light
Yeah.
waste of space that they're going to save for you. This is you have to still think it's a print form of publication, even though most people may get it online. So you can't just put URLs in there. So everybody has said the same thing, which is your message is important. Lead with what will allow people to relate to you, and just make it succinct, each point, and then leave it at that. And you'll be,
Right.
I think.
Right. Yeah, and thanks for the distinction about op-eds versus letters to the editor in terms of the publication accepting them or not. No surprise there that your name must be more known. So I don't want to, yeah, we can talk about something else, or
Well,
don't wanna-
no, and that's fair. Can I ask for one thing here, Jane?
Yeah.
And I guess I'll ask also the audience. If this is a letter to the editor in response to Mr. Gross's article, right? And we want to emphasize this, that 30%, there's 60% suicide, but 30% is this, and this is
Right.
in front of me. Does everyone think that this could, as a parent, it's my job, and it's the personal statement, can that still come to the top of a letter to the editor? Even when, I don't know the right answer to this, really, I'd say.
You mean ARPA because it's only 30%? Is that your point?
No. I just mean, even if the letter to the, if the letter to the editor is in response to another article, can we still lead with, with that hook, that personal hook? I would guess yes. I would guess yes. I don't know if anyone else has a comment.
I just wonder if it might, I understand if you're writing a letter to the editor sometimes, or maybe often you do or refer to something that you read there. But I think it might be better to not put that, not focus so much on that.
Right.
I mean, you could say I'm responding to Mr. Gross's whatever, or you can say, as Mr. Gross highlighted in his whatever date, article, actually the main, most gun deaths are blah, 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 blah. For example, yesterday in New York, this many people died from gun violence, or in Chicago, this many people, or however you want to do it. But
Right.
I would just refer to it sort of in passing, but not make it the
Right.
kind of takes away from some of the punch. And I think you have a lot of punch in here.
Right.
Just needs to be kind of moved around.
Right.
So that would be my thought.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think this is instructive, hopefully for others and not just me, that what you're saying, Sarah, is that even a letter to the editor doesn't have to be mostly in response to a prior publication.
I mean, I don't know about that, but I think if you are going to make it in response to that, there's some ways to do it that wouldn't make it the main thing. Other people probably know more about that particular question than I do, but I think you can refer to it without making it the main thing.
Right.
I would add two things. I'm Dorothy Novak. I'm a pediatrician in Philadelphia and a frequent op-ed writer as well. I think I agree that if it's a letter to the editor, you do need to right up front say what article you're responding to. But I agree that it can be very short, like that whole first paragraph could be condensed into one phrase. I think it usually starts like colon, and then like what article you're responding to, and then you pick out one thing, as Mr. Gross says, 30% of, gun deaths are due to intimate partner violence and gang-related conflict, just kind of one of those facts. And then right away go into, as a parent, my job is to keep my children safe. And beyond that, I would say that as a parent is a good hook, but it's very important. There's a lot of parents in the world who care about their children's safety. I think it's really important to think about, what do you have to say? What makes you sort of an expert in this field? And by that, I don't mean like you have a PhD and you've published a million articles. I mean, you could have personal experience. You could be a parent. You could be a mental health expert. There are all different ways that you might have a unique perspective on this topic. So I would actually say, not as a parent is my job, but as a parent and, an expert in mental health hygiene, I understand the immense value of keeping children safe from gun violence or something like that. So I think it's important to also bring in, something that gives you a perspective that makes it even more valuable than being a parent.
Right, I hear you.
And unique and different from other people.
Well, you are a nurse.
Right.
Nurses are national heroes right now.
Yeah.
Exactly. As a parent and a mental health expert and a medical professional, or whatever way you want to say it,
Right.
I do think that you do have professional expertise in this area and may well have personal experience or really anything that gives you a unique perspective that should make other people interested in hearing what you have to say.
Right. Right.
I do believe that nurses are trusted
Mhm.
more than doctors, more than firefighters, like the number one. So
They say, yeah.
Jean, you're a hero. And
Yeah.
thanks for sharing your writing.
Agree.
I'm a
Here, here.
vaccinator. I'm a COVID vaccinator, but I mean, I'm not an ER nurse, seeing. the
I
damage
think that
to
I'm
the
going to stop you
torso.
I'm going to stop you for a moment because I
know
think that many of us are really quick to say what we're not. And someone taught me this a very long time ago, that every time we hear ourselves saying, but I'm not a researcher, but I'm not an ER nurse, but I'm not, and just as soon as you hear yourself starting to say that, like, stop yourself and reframe it instead of like, this is what I do have to bring to the table. This is what I am an expert in and what I know from my own experience, from my professional experience, for whatever reason that I have, an opinion we're stating in this area. So we never want to apologize for what we're not, because, your opinion is so important.
Yeah.
All this good input is very helpful, Jean. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I don't know what your point was with respect to Mr. Gross's position. Did you agree with him or not? Okay. And if you're going to use that as the reason that you're writing the letter, you should have said, if most of the gun violence is caused by incidents outside of mass shootings, then I, as a parent and a nurse, have this perspective. And you talk about the 40%, the 30%, the 60%, and you go into all these things, the references, and I didn't know whether you agreed with them or not, that we needed to depoliticize or not. I mean, do you know what your position was relative to? I mean, what were you trying to say if his was the hook to get you in?
And I'm going to stop share for just a second so we can continue sort of discussion here. And I'll just say this too. I appreciate the concept earlier that we have to put ourselves, we can't underestimate, we have to sort of, somehow we have to couch ourselves and our perspective effectively, right? And I'm wondering, like, can we say, as a nurse and I don't know if you can call yourself a public health nurse, since you work for the city, like, as a public health nurse, as a parent, I have to worry about the entire city and my house. Like, I don't, I might be speaking in hyperbole. Like, I'm wondering, I'm just throwing ideas out there. I'm throwing ideas out there for anyone, Jean or others.
I think I agree. And I think it could be two sentences. It could be, as a parent, I care also the safety of my children, as a public health nurse and, mental health expert. I see firsthand the effects of gun violence on New Yorkers every day, or, you can put both of those in there easily.
That's great.
Thank you. Yeah.
it's kind of like a 1-2 punch, you know, as a this, I know this, but as a this, I know even more.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. No, no, Bob, Dr. Larson, I'm not sure what my answer is, so I'll have to think about that. I don't have a ready answer to your question, but I appreciate your.
It's
insight.
I think you made it, like, you agree with you
I
agree with the
agree with-
point.
I
And-
agree
and
with Mr. Gross. It's like I said at the beginning, there are a few different things that were in my mind when I wrote this. One was that the Gross thing was sort of echoing what I learned at the DFA thing about the stratification of violence. But that I guess is truly separate from why I really wrote the letter, which was more about local violence, and I wanted to stop. You know, so it's funny how you sort of bring your emotions to things, and you're not.
Well, I
I'm
think
all for
that's-
emotions. I will say I'm all for emotions.
Yeah.
Need 'em
I
all.
am. I mean, as long as you're mixing them in with some good facts and some good reasons to have some expertise, to be able to say it breaks my heart. You know, I lie awake worrying about this. I mean, that's all good.
Yeah, I do. And I just want to say to Dr. Henry, I have twins who are at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And they, a friend of theirs coincidentally was shot recently on the campus. I don't know, it's a local thing, so it wasn't in the national news. So, you know, but that's Tucson. I'm talking about New York. So anyway.
I'm very familiar with it.
Yeah.
That's where I just moved from.
That particular event.
Yes.
So you can see how, like, I'm just a typical person. I'm like trying to process that. You see, I think, so it's just, you know, I think some people are better at processing that and then extracting what's really important to make public in a letter to the editor. So
You
Well,
just
I'll
did
just-
it again. You're not just a typical person. I'm gonna catch people every time they say I'm just a this or I'm not really a this.
But I
Now-
want to, Arthur, if there's anything else others want to say or talk about something they're working on, I'm
And I-
more than happy.
Can I ask, Jean, I'm glad you brought this to our attention. I want to ask in a different concept. If I can ask in the larger context, one thing you brought up, I don't know if you meant to, but I think we all need to think about is mass shootings get a ton of media attention, and suddenly people want to sort of change, you know, bring some change to policy, want to consider adding, you know, safe storage or increasing something. And they get, like, I mean, one thing I'm taking away from this, and I'm reminding myself of, mass shootings get a disproportionate amount of attention. Well, maybe not that they shouldn't, well, who am I to say? But we somehow need to remember the tragedy that's happening every day, every weekend.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what I'm getting numb to. It's like, I mean, it's depressing me, but I'm getting numb. It's as though the news media is numb to, like, what do we do about what happened this last night? I don't know how people feel about that. I think that's a big problem, actually.
It's not only getting numb to it, but not knowing about it. I mean, I don't know about everybody who got shot in Brooklyn, you know, this past weekend.
Well, one thing I really like about what you just said also is that it could be helpful in this kind of piece because you want to also think about, like, what is your call to action? So, like, it's not just enough to say, like, this is a horrible situation, but, like, and here's what we should do about it. And I think that's a really good point that Arka made, that, you know, a call to action, for example, in this kind of piece could be, and therefore we need to do a better job of bringing attention, you know, or the media needs to do a better job of bringing attention to each individual person who's being shot on a daily basis across the country, that, you know, the numbers are adding up, you know, more than mass shootings, or, you know, that was a long way to say it. But I mean, I think that the idea of the call to action being, and so we need to amplify each of these individual events and make all these numbers human to people who are reading. That's a really important call to action. There's some really great organizations who are working on doing that, on sort of transforming the way that gun violence is reported in the media, to be sure it's not reported as just, like, you know, a name and a number, but actually a story about who that person is. And I think movements like that are incredibly important for raising awareness. So I agree that, you know, it's important to think about not just, like, what do I want to say, but, like, or what do I care about, but what is the singular point I'm going to make about what we can do about it?
This is a little bit of a tangent, so pardon me for a second. But Arco, I think you said something that's very important, and if the concept is you're trying to a little bit chastise the media for focusing too much on mass shootings, school shootings, that kind of thing, and ignoring all of the everyday violence that is there. If you're planning on placing this in the setting of, here's the next mass shooting, here's this op-ed, what might be reasonable to do, or a strategy would be to say, since this prior last mass shooting, these are all the people who died in New York, in Manhattan, because they were shot to death. And I mean, I would almost name them all, because then it takes that abstractness out of it, makes it human. And the other thing, like most of the time on the news, which I tend not to watch because I see the news at work every day, we see who perpetrated the crime. We don't really see the victim. And I would make that person visible through what you're writing.
Another way to humanize in general.
I wonder, I'm so glad that sort of Gina's brought this all to our attention, because I don't think about this enough. So I'll just ask, what, I guess, do these, what message do we also need to bring? Like saying their names out loud means something to me too. I think one thing I appreciate, I believe it was Brady that had a memorial, that created the memorial on the Washington lawn. Was it a month ago or so? Maybe someone can correct me. But either Brady or Giffords made the memorial on the Washington lawn and it had a cross for all the gun deaths from this year or something, just across the National Mall. That, in a way, we could that's kind of a story, like in the Washington Post, that's a story and everything. But what is our call to action? Should we have those kind of calls to action, like look at this, or I don't know. I'm asking a little bit about call to action. Call to action is what I'm sort of trying to talk about.
I feel as though you all, as writers who are healthcare providers, can always end your writing with a call to action to your colleagues, to ask your patients to lock up their guns, to keep them safely stored. That's one small thing that I know that DFA and led by Arca is working on, that topic of getting that training to take place at more locations, more medical schools and residencies. So that's one option for people.
And like what Dr. Dark said earlier, make it personal at some level. It affects all of us, but how do you see it? If you're an emergency room nurse, if you're a trauma surgeon, if you're a psychiatrist, this last week, I saw 4 people all in the same mass shooting. I've seen 8 others in the same mass shooting. I've got more coming up. The mass shooting was 4 years ago. And the point I made is that if you think this stuff goes away like the next day, it does not. And I confessed, I'm saturated. I can't take any more of these cases. I mean, I'm a person. I can't hear more personal accounts of senseless violence that happened on one day and affected so many people, and what has changed. And so then maybe you lead into, we can be better about this. We don't have to have assault rifles. We don't have to let people who shouldn't have guns whatever happened. And in that case, there were multiple things that should have been better and done better. And I push back against this notion of we can't do anything. That's what I think DFA is trying to do. We can do something. It does make a difference. I live in New Mexico. We got a red flag law through, and our neighboring state in Colorado doesn't have it. That young man who killed 10 people in King Soopers, his family could have asked for a judicial hearing, and he shouldn't have had those guns if he lived in New Mexico. So we can do things. We can take away the assault rifles. We can stop people who have histories of violence. I mean, it's so simple. The number one predictor of violence is a past history of violence. So why would you let a guy who beats his wife have access to guns in your state. That's what Doctors for America wants to do. And you lead in, Jean, with your story about being a parent and a nurse and caring about your community.
And can I ask anyone as well, in the chat, there's a good chat going on here. I'll ask, I don't know much about June 4th, except I'm supposed to wear orange. Can anyone else say a little bit about June 4th, which I think will be a writing prompt for all of us. Can anyone say a little bit more, or we could review it before we go anywhere?
I mean, I know it's led by Everytown for gun safety, and the Moms Demand Action support it. It's an effort to bring awareness to gun violence and to survivors. You wear orange in solidarity. I believe it's also Suicide Prevention Month. I could be wrong about that, but there's a connection also to the suicide topic as opposed to the moms and just red shirts. But it's in Everytown for gun safety, which is the biggest organization that's working in this space in the country.
Is it a physical thing or a?
It used to be back in the pre-COVID days. Yeah, we'd go to the Capitol and you'd march. You'd go to your local event that would be a Wear Orange event.
Right, like in New York City, there's a couple of different events, but one of them is for the groups to walk over the Brooklyn Bridge wearing orange. Yeah, but it's just sort of like an annual way to gain attention about their work around gun violence.
I have to confess that I'm not only a Warriors fan, I'm a Giants fan. It's very easy for me to wear orange, and I'm giving a presentation to our local public library, and I will be wearing orange and have a vignette about the tales of wounded workers that involves gun violence. So there's different ways you can do this.
Jean, can I ask you something, Jean?
Yep.
You live in New York?
Yep.
Can I ask where you work?
I work for the New York City Health Department.
Oh, good for you.
But I worked at other jobs, but I work in lead poisoning, but I am technically a public health nurse. Yeah,
well, that's a great hook too. And I'm just asking because I live in Brooklyn and work in the city, and I'm retired from Bellevue. And anyway, I'd just like to be in touch, and I'd be happy to work with you on your piece.
Oh, thank you.
If you wanted to, I would
Can you put your email in the chat box?
Let me see if I can think. I'm very bad at these things, but I'll try to do it.
Okay.
And if
But Arthur, this thing about call to action, it's such it's a rich question, and I know we're ending soon. I don't exactly know what you mean. Again, I think you mean, does the letter that an editor or writer have to say an answer to the problem?
Well, no, Jean, I'm actually saying that you've prompted a bigger question from us, and I'm just asking that theoretically, beyond your letter. What is our next call to action here? I'm sitting here spitballing ideas, like you saying, their names. I think Cedric and people have said, and Dorothy and Cedric have said, maybe we should be saying those names out loud. Should I be trying to get some real estate on DFA's website, on our blog post, after the next mass shooting to say, well, we're focusing on Eastern Pennsylvania, or, and these are these are the names, the past, they're not a mass shooting, but look, there's 150 names right there. So the call to this, I was actually just, you prompted a bigger discussion right here, Jean, I think.
Clarify.
Also, if for some reason you submit it and it doesn't get published, DFA is always there to publish it too.
Thanks for mentioning that. If you have a finished piece, something that you're ready to send in, and you're like, I don't know quite where to send it, I would definitely start local, but we have a tool where we can share with you health writers in either your area or nationally that you would then send. So we could also post it on our social media at DFA and share it, but better to share a published piece via some publication. But I'm saying that we can help share your piece pre-publication to help get it published once it's finished. We can't give out lists before you've got a piece ready to share.
Yeah, like DFA can't be your editor. You really have to get something that's pretty clean, and clean involves a lot of things. Even at the end, you confused me because you said you were an employee and of this entity and DFA. So I thought you worked for DFA.
Yeah,
You,
that was,
you don't say, and I'm affiliated or a member of DFA. So those things make a difference. You know, they and you don't want them to get published and have them be errors. So you know, go through it, have somebody that's a stickler that you know, edit it and or proofread it, and then do what Dr. Dark I think is suggesting, and Allison, if you don't get it published, and maybe it'll help others to get excited as well.
I'll also ask something as the offshoot to this conversation. Should we be using our real estate, our online real estate, to put the names out there? I mean, like you know, we have a lot of members. We have a Twitter account and everything. Should we pick a locality? And in honor of Jean sort of bring this up, should we bring up a locality like one of the boroughs? I believe the boroughs that are in rougher position in New York City are Brooklyn and the Bronx.
yeah, I think so.
And should we do a blog post that just says, not a mass shooting, but isn't this a tragedy? All these names from the last 20 days in the news. I'm just throwing something out there.
I'm going to leave it, you guys. I'm going to go watch some basketball. Let me just say this. If you want to publish names, make it about DFA members who have died in emergency rooms in the last 6 months, who have been shot, beat up, attacked, whatever else, taking care of people who are victims of gun violence, nurses and doctors and orderlies and all that, as opposed to just the people, because they do exist, okay? I worked in an emergency room. They're dangerous places. And even if they don't die, you know, they got attacked taking care of people because of this insane violence that we have going on. That's an expression of our gun epidemic, because the people who are victims get brought in, their families attack the doctors or the nurses or the police officers. And you see what I'm saying? I mean, and that makes it really like, wow. And that's what people related to with COVID, that there were all these healthcare workers that were putting their lives at risk. So it's one thing to talk about the victims in the community that we don't really know, do we? Unless we do. But to talk about our comrades who put themselves at risk to take care of others who have been shot or have shot others, because, you know, we still have to take care of the bad people too, right? Okay. That's my
Thanks,
thought.
Bob.
Yeah,
And
Bob,
also suicide.
Yeah. Suicide.
Doctors, nurses have killed themselves at higher, they always do in any given year,
That's
but
right.
in higher numbers during the pandemic. And I don't know how much of that is by guns.
And I have to say, and we're going to, you know, probably we're going to try to close it in 5 minutes here or less. And before I sort of get to housekeeping, I just need to say, yeah, Jean, thanks for doing it. Thanks for getting us
Yeah,
talking
really.
about this. Good job.
Brave soul.
Yeah, Jean, we needed
Thank
this. We
you.
needed you to get us talking about all this stuff tonight. And I
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of us would be talking about this tonight if you didn't do that. So
Yeah.
thanks for
Well,
starting, you know.
Thank you so much for the venue to talk and for all of that editing feedback, which I know is a one-time thing. Thank
Well,
you
no,
so much.
Well, I mean, you see that Sarah's email is also on there too.
Yes, thank you so much.
And we can continue working together. Allison, is there anything we wanted to mention about, you said you wanted to mention a couple of things before the end of the session here, Allison?
I think I put them in chat as far as there's definitely a sign up for our future events with DFA in general, and those are not exclusively gun violence prevention events. And then I'm now putting in the chat again, a little bit closer to home, this sort of a follow-up to this conversation, and people won't need to have come to this conversation to come to the next one, but it's on June 22nd, similar kind of format. we had almost 50 people sign up for this, and we're thrilled that you all came. It's actually great that they signed up. Even if they didn't come, we'll still send them the recording, and we'll send them any links that were shared in the chat as well. So thank you.
Allison, you were supposed to say, and if you're going to be part of DFA's book club, you want to be there in July when Dr. Bob tells his stories from wounded workers, right?
That's what I was just about to say. That one is actually on the events calendar quite yet. It's not official. I mean, it's official, but it's not, we don't have it on our calendar yet, but we're getting there. We're having a new website coming up within the month. So
Okay.
long overdue. Very
Yeah.
grateful to all of you. Thanks, Dr. Bob.
So I guess
All
I
right.
should say then tonight, then I want to thank everyone for their contributions here tonight. Now Jean gets the ultimate thanks. Thank you so much. And everyone that's spoken today. I know we're all just trying to contribute. And I think, it's not just sort of where we submit papers, it's where the discussion goes and what do we do with the discussion, I think. It's all going to add up and make a difference. I am absolutely sure of it. But we all have to keep together. We have to stay together and support each other. So that's me here also. That's part of why I'm supporting this forum right here, just supporting each other in the discussion.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Arka. Thanks, Arka.
Thank you, Arka.
Yeah, Sarah,
I have a question.
go right ahead.
Way back when I had written something about universal health care and sent it to DFA, but I never heard anything. I don't know how relevant it is right now, although I think it might be, but I was just wondering who would I talk to about doing sort of like what Jean did to get people's take on that, or an updated version.
Say that you can.
Yeah,
so
I mean, you
Cedric-
happen to be on the phone call with Dr. Dark. Dr. Cedric Dark is on our call. He's not only on our National Board of Directors, but he's on our Health for All steering committee. And so we do have an active steering committee that is looking for things to do. And I bet they would love to take a look at your work, take a look at any resubmission, but I'll let Cedric explain.
But also, before Cedric speaks for 1 second, Sarah, the New York Health Cares Act today and tomorrow for all full healthcare for every New Yorker. There's been a lobbying effort for that.
I know.
Today and tomorrow. But Cedric, go
Tomorrow
ahead.
too, because I couldn't go today. And I didn't know about tomorrow.
Cedric, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I would just say if you want to do something similar to what Jean did tonight with our Health for All group, email me. I'll send along to the chair of the Health for All committee. I think this would be a fun thing for them to do.
Okay.
Part of their steering committee, and just have everybody, kind of pick the writing apart and help you try to improve it.
Thank you. Why can't I see your whole email?
It's Cedric at policyprescriptions.org.
Oh, because it says Cedric Dark at Real.
Yep, or Sarah, I just put it in the chat. I'm not sure if you're able to open that and look at it, but you could double click on it or right click on it, however your computer works, and you could capture his email, and it's all right there.
Okay.
Real Cedric Twitter.
I want to thank Dr. Kelly and Dr. Marion for submitting your applications to be part of our committee. And we really appreciate your interest in volunteering and giving your time to the gun violence prevention efforts by Doctors for America. And I can't say how I voted, but I like you both. So thank you very much. Okay.
And we're both Henrys. That's got to mean something, right?
We made it easy.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to take off on you guys. I got to go watch these Warriors. Bye-bye.
All right, guys. And I guess we'll stick around. Thanks then. Good night, guys. Thanks for everything. Jean, if